Boon should, be here any minute. Do you have any more questions about what happened?
Not really. I'm mostly just wondering how quickly I'm gonna get out of here so I can beat Elias's ass.
Just rest up for now, babe. That's gonna get you back on your feet quicker, okay?
Okay, yeah, sure. But that's boring! And I've got plenty of people around that are probably worried. I need to put something on the gram at least.
Dale, I'm pretty sure your fans already know why you're not online, given the news reports.
Okay, how long have you known my secret identity?
It's supposed to be a secret? I thought you were just doing the helmet for the aesthetic. You'd think it'd be obvious when your superhero name and your DJ stage name is just your last name with the third after it.
Oh, yeah, that reminds me. Has your dad come through here yet?
Not that I know of. Might have popped in while I was unconscious, I guess. To make sure that I was at least alive.
You know, it still bothers me that he's never around. You know, I still ain't met the guy.
Yeah, I know. I did tell you that he was around a lot more when I was a kid, though.
Okay, that neither explains nor excuses the fact that he's just nowhere to be seen now, especially when you're in this kind of...
I'm sure Augie has his reasons.
Henry, why are you on a nickname basis with my dad?
Hey, Dale, I was able to find your mixer. You got some weird samples in here, though. Who the hell is Monkey? I have arrived at a bad time.
No, actually, you, haven't. In fact, if you're here, I should probably head out. Detective Dyer is probably waiting on me outside. I do have a lot of paperwork to do in relation to the incident.
Sure. We'll talk later.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think Jake and I both have some serious conversations to have with you.
If I had my guesses, it's probably about what went down on my end with, those two. Not really a whole lot of a guess, is it? Okay, Dale found out who Soraya really was, and, I recognized the way Chad was talking to me. Yeah, I kind of figured that's exactly what it was going to be. I was in whatever that space was that I told you about when he claimed to reset the world before. I did end up getting his real name somehow, though. Rakemrats. I thought his real name was...
Okay, considering what she was doing, I wouldn't be surprised if that was another implanted memory or some shit like that.
Makes sense to me. I mean, dealing with memories does seem to be the normal MO for Rakemrats, too. He also seems to need something from me before he can actually go through with killing me. I don't know what, but I clearly didn't have it. It's like he's trying to unseal something from inside my mind or restore a lost memory. Probably has to do with what I did to them, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I think the only real surprising part about this is that one of the 5 immortals is on his side.
The who?
That is such a long explanation, and I know I have time, but you know what? Can I just explain it to you later? Shit's been kind of wild.
Either way, the history of this shit is a little bit less important right now than dealing with what they're doing right now. I mean, after all, they could still be lurking in the shadows for all we know.
Wait, shit, that reminds me. I'm late for a fucking commentary.
I'm sorry. You schedule appointments for that shit? What kind of fucking loser are you?
I don't schedule appointments for commentaries, but Todd in the Shadows did a review of Not Like Us. The diss track on Drake by Kendrick Lamar. It was a few months ago at this point.
Boon, you ain't gotta explain no more, I'm in.
I mean, I wasn't really asking you to co-op on it, but...
Go ahead and count me in too.
You have a near-fatal stab wound?
F50 got shot 9 times. Who gives a shit? I need something to do with my time. I can still talk, and it sure beats lore dumping all over your ass, no ditty.
You know what? Sure. Fuck it. Why not?
This will be my second video covering the Drake-Kendrick feud of 2024. I wasn't going to, since I released the first one right as it effectively ended, right after Kendrick delivered the song Not Like Us, which we can now definitively call the kill shot.
Boon, I swear to fuck, you did not just rope us to that stupid secretly covering a second video thing you do.
Okay, for one, I haven't done that nearly enough for it to be a trope to make fun of. Yet.
You've done it once, that's enough.
For two, I'm not, but this is important context. He's covered the whole beef, somehow doing so in 20 minutes, but, well, he was paying attention. I mean, not very well, spoiler warning, that's one of the big issues with this whole thing, but he's at least aware of the full context.
Joe Jackson!
One thing we have learned in the past 2 months is that finishing moves can last quite a while. It was obvious within a few days of release that Not Like Us was going to stick around, but I thought Kendrick was just going to take the W. Instead, I am making this video in the wake of Kendrick dropping a fucking music video for Not Like Us, which is, again, a song he released 2 fucking months ago as part of a feud that he definitively won 2 fucking months ago.
Homie, you ought to know how the industry works by now. Sure, it's a diss track, but it's still a track, and releasing the visual medium for it tends to be part of the process.
Yeah, releasing a music video for something that's even more successful than anticipated as well is pretty normal. I mean, Old Town Road exists. It didn't have a music video before it blew up the entire internet and got a big budget music video months after its initial success to prolong its space in the pop culture zeitgeist. There's plenty of precedents for doing this.
Even if we ignore the artistic reasons, the music video is part of the presentation of the song itself. It serves as the last piece of what Drake was doing in the beef that Kendrick needed to respond to. Or did you forget that Drake diss track before Not Like Us and Meet the Grams that also had a larger scale music video? Which was the one thing that Kendrick didn't do before now.
At some point during this, Kendrick declared himself the biggest hater, but I don't know that I understood what that meant until right now. He's gonna win a Grammy for calling Drake a sex predator. He's gonna adapt Not Like Us into a graphic novel, and then he'll adapt that graphic novel into an HBO series, and then he'll adapt that series into a Broadway musical. He's going to win an EGOT for Not Like Us. Which is fine with me. I've thought about basically nothing else since it happened, and I wanted the excuse to discuss it further. So, thanks Kendrick for dropping a video and rocketing the song back up to #1.
Yeah, sure, let's act like it's incredibly audacious for Kendrick to release a music video, then literally point out the pervasiveness of the song as a reason why the music video would be super fucking relevant. And I get exaggerating something or stuff like that for the sake of adding entertainment value to what would normally be a pretty bland review, but actually the more I think about that kind of paints what you're doing here as kind of just fine? A little cringy, sure, but and the padding, the runtime, that's kind of cringe. But then again, I'm kind of doing that right now by acknowledging it. I mean, it's not the way I would do it, sure, but
Hold that thought.
The fact that there's a music video should not be surprising. It's a big hit song. It should get a music video, if for no other reason than to make it easier for YouTubers to make videos about it. Ahem. But it was still surprising to me for 2 reasons. One, despite the party vibes coming off of it, this is still a really mean, ugly song and one of the ugliest feuds we've ever seen. And 2, Kendrick, for the most part, was a ghost during this entire battle.
oh. Well, in that case, that kind of changes the vibe entirely, doesn't it?
Yeah, kind of figured it would.
Yeah, so you're about to elaborate on that last part, and I think I want to use your own analogy on you there, and that first part I'm going to let slide because other than specifically calling out Beyonce, I probably would have made a similar joke. Let's talk about the mean-spirited means no music video. Yeah, bullshit. The Thunder Rolls has a music video, and that's a song about murdering a cheating husband.
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, yeah, and the music video is about the man abusing her to make it self-defense instead of murder. But, that was only in, 1990.
Is that why you hate country music?
No, I hate country music because most of it doesn't have the balls to be that daring and expressive.
Hey, yo, not to be the type of guy who gets shit back on track, but, right, sorry. I mean, if Toddy Smalls want to talk about diss tracks, I can be Fire Belly for a sec. Literally hit him up, my man. You know, claim to be a player, but I fucked your wife. And that was way before the internet was a big deal, too. So that's really the only reason the music video was only for the clean version. But, you know, saying bust instead of fuck ain't exactly lessen the impact much. Would say it's because it's a diss track that this is unprecedented, but that's not really true either, as Jacob pointed out. Fucking Tupac. But even looking beyond that to modern day, Look What You Made Me Do by Taylor Swift is a diss track. Bad Blood, the version used for the music video happening to feature Kendrick Lamar, is a diss track. I'm sorry, but if the Swifties are used to this and you're not, there's a problem.
Drake was constantly providing updates on social media and making appearances, while Kendrick was radio silent except for the handful of diss tracks he dropped. This feud has been basically a one-character drama because Kendrick keeps himself so private, and because Kendrick basically designed it that way, to be a referendum on Drake. Drake is the protagonist of this story. Drake is the antagonist. When they make the movie about this, it should be told entirely from Drake's perspective, and Kendrick shouldn't show up a single time, like the Germans in Dunkirk. Or maybe he appears out of the corner of Drake's eye sometimes. Like, Kendrick is a phantom. Drake was front and center.
I mean, that's just how Kendrick normally operates, though. He barely uses social media and just stays private until it's time to put it on wax. Yeah, that doesn't work as much because the music was the primary method of interaction between the two anyway. This being a referendum on Drake was by design, sure, but the extreme depiction you describe doesn't make sense for this, and for reasons way beyond just the fact that part of the paranoia placed into Drake has to be a response to something that Kendrick does, but also for reasons that I'm going to touch on later that even your previous video on this beef just completely overlooked.
In fact, he was the first one to drop a music video while the feud was happening, which that just blows me away. I am in awe of the hubris. Like, he crushed the Good Kid, Mad City van, and he went to New Ho King and everything, and he was showing off his chain, which is a point of contention in the feud for some reason. I don't know.
Aight, motherfucker. First of all, the snake chain ain't part of it. That's him calling Kendrick a snake with visual storytelling. A couple frames after that are actually the chains, multiple, that are important. They originally belonged to Pharrell Williams. Even if you think it's the snake chain, you should be able to tell what the issue about the chain is from the line of the song being played as he fucking shows it off. The lyrics to which are on screen. So you had to see that together when editing your ADR on the video as B-roll. How dumb you gotta be to miss that fucking point? And again, it's one thing to make a joke or something about missing details to add entertainment value, but that's really not what this is. This is a detail that is directly in front of your face that you seemingly are just not listening to in the slightest. This will be a pattern. In fact, it has been a pattern with a lot of your content, but details.
I'm still here, by the way. I'm just, waiting for him to make some stupid point about production or something. I'm pretty sure that's what I'm here for.
The point is that he wanted this to be an event. He pulled out all the spotlights and the cameras and everything. Like Apollo Creed coming out to Living in America with James Brown and all the dancing girls and then immediately being killed.
Yeah, immediately. Oh, okay, sure. Funnily enough, the Creed versus Drago analogy is more accurate if you actually tell it accurately. Sure, Drake got punches in, but they just didn't faze Kendrick, and he didn't even throw anything in round one until near the end. But when he did start, it was basically insurmountable odds, but Drake was too egotistical to see he already lost. Like, it definitely wasn't immediately getting his shit rocked, even in Rocky, because it's actually, really fucking important to that scene that he goes into the corner between rounds, between rounds 1 and 2, as in not a 1-round knockout, as in not immediately. Fucking dumbass. It's almost like you ain't explaining it right because you don't know boxing or rap.
In the past month or so, though, Kendrick finally moved into the protagonist role, starting officially with his first public appearance since the whole thing started, with a one-off concert in LA on Juneteenth. And this was a true celebration of Kendrick. Kendrick united warring street gangs, and then he performed Not Like Us 6 times.
My man, you just explained why this wasn't a celebration of Kendrick with a passing sentence. This was about community, and Kendrick was a uniting factor of it. Oh, don't worry, or, well, I guess do, depending on your point of view of it. That's not the only thing about cultures he's not part of he won't understand. In fact, he's really gonna double down on that later. You know, I wasn't gonna worry about him not understanding culture, but then you say he was gonna double down, and now I'm worried.
And then a week ago, he put out a video.
They not like us. They not like us. They not like us.
I live in LA, so I was like seeing and hearing tons of reports on where he was and what he was filming. And since this video has come out, I have heard this song blasting out of other people's cars and scooters whenever I go outside.
Sometimes you gotta pop out and show niggas.
The radio edit for this is hilarious, by the way, if you haven't heard it. Like, half the song is missing, including all the best lines. Probably because it's defamatory to the point of legal liability.
No, it's because you can't put pedophilia on the radio, Todd. It's definitely the pedophile stuff.
Yeah, defamation has nothing to do with it because, if it was, there would already be lawsuits about this and Meet the Grams. There's no way Drake's PR team would just let this sit if it was actual defamation.
Mr. Slayer, the second lawsuit just dropped.
God damn it. Whatever, there are still no lawsuits when Todd's video came out, so my point still stands. And besides, considering Drake's immediate response was to call himself too famous for the allegations, and he brought up the pedo shit first on Taylor Made, yeah, good luck with that shit in court, homie.
Talk that jail shit!
Like, this is not a new observation here, but it's worth repeating how tactically brilliant Kendrick's moves were, because Drake's big song, Family Matters, could have easily dominated the conversation and ruined Kendrick's reputation. Like, there are some very dark accusations in there. But before that could take root, Kendrick had immediately stopped the momentum by releasing his own, even darker song, and then after we all went to bed confused and unsettled, Kendrick released a party song to send the momentum back in the opposite direction.
Well, that's more than just the tactic of disarming Drake's diss track, it's also using Drake's own tactic against him.
Something, by the way, that he hints he's gonna do in Euphoria.
Back to back, I like that record. I'ma get back to that for the record.
Oh, well, you thought he was only talking about 616 in LA? Yeah, I guess we should bring this up now. Part of the theme of that battle was outdoing Drake at his own tactics, which includes the back-to-back method. And people forget how down-tempo Charged Up actually was, while back-to-back served as the summarized party song. I'm not saying it's exactly one-to-one. Back-to-back and Not Like Us are very different types of beats. Meet the Grams and Charged Up are so different. And the storytelling and theming on display from Kendrick is way better than what Drake was doing to Meek Mill, but well, it's like you said, the whole thing was about Drake, and that includes, to quote myself for a moment here, catching his bullets and chucking them back at him. You did not just quote your own fucking diss track. I most certainly did. Boy, you don't get your goofy ass.
In fact, we should stop and reflect on how many bad moves Drake has made here versus how perfectly Kendrick played every move. Like, Drake recruits J. Cole, who is less than useless in a fight.
And I got my niggas like, what you gonna do, Cole?
You might as well just stick a live grenade down your pants.
So you were, in fact, not paying attention at all. Cool. Oh yeah, totally. Real intricate recruiting process of putting him on the song he also wanted Kendrick on. Something, by the way, that got hinted at in Euphoria.
Surprised you wanted that feature request. You know that we got some shit to address.
Now, I'm gonna be 100% fair on this one. It does take like about a third grade level of lyrical comprehension in order to understand that that's what's being said here. So I perfectly well understand why Todd in the Shadows, in particular, did not understand that.
And sure, let's pretend that J. Cole doesn't know how to fight anybody. Did you, forget about him boxing Diddy's ears?
Now, in theory, you could just be saying that in the context of like a rap battle, but are we going to pretend that there weren't any good bars in 7 Minute Drill? Are we going to pretend that he can't diss when he did have a respectable response that only became less respectable after he apologized for it? He also beat Lil Pump and basically the entire mumble rap movement in a rap battle without even talking shit about them. But nah, yeah, right, useless in a fight. Yo ass the one useless in the fight, fucking kid next door father looking ass.
But now that Kendrick has finally taken center stage, I think it's worth asking, who exactly is Kendrick in this? There's an old interview from 2014 floating around where 50 Cent was asked what it was like working with Kendrick, and he had this to say.
Kendrick is always going to be a media darling. He has the ability to make you believe he had no idea this was going to happen. Because he'll be like, yo, like, wow, like that energy's there. You knew what you was working.
Right.
You worked on it and it paid off. Don't act like you didn't know it was going to happen. And he was like,
yeah, and that's kind of colored my perception of Not Like Us. Remember, Kendrick started this.
Motherfucker, big three, nigga, it should beat me, nigga, pop!
Or at the very least, he's the one who dragged it into public. He's the one who threw the first public shots.
Why the fuck you playing like that when talking about Kendrick throwing public shots? Yeah, like, for one, Drake and Kendrick have been sneak dissing each other for a long ass time, but you know when the first public shots were thrown? August 14th, 2013.
I'm usually homeboys with the same niggas I'm rhyming with, but this is hip-hop and them niggas should know what time it is.
Cole responded to this, Drake was pretty openly butthurt about it, and pretty much every single YouTube video covering the beef other than yours has pointed out that the whole thing starts all the way back here. I mean, yeah, Kendrick was the first one to take shots, but it wasn't like that. And based on everything Kendrick was saying at the time, it wasn't intended to be outright beef, but rather an invitation to competition.
Oh, of course, if you just want to count the recent shit, it was Future that started it. Shut the fuck up. The verse was on a whole fucking album of Drake disses. If you're gonna ignore Control, then you have to talk about the fact that Kendrick got recruited into somebody else's beef. Difference being that he just took that shit over.
Remember, he is responding to this line.
Love when they argue the hardest MC. Is it K-Dot, is it Aubrey or me?
Which, one, didn't come from Drake, and two, is not an insult.
Hey, can we like run the second half of that real quick?
We the big three like we started a league, but right now I feel like Muhammad Ali.
Wow, it's almost like he's saying that he respects the other two, but still thinks of himself as above them, especially when he follows it up later like this.
The Spider-Man meme is me looking at Drake.
In other words, it's a big three, alright, but there's definitely a big two within that.
It's not like Drake ain't up on that narrative like it was. Whoa, holy shit.
I'm like 90% sure you can't say that.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Just put some silence in there instead.
Why do I get the impression this is a very specific reference?
Look. All I know is the GNX by Kendrick Lamar is a very good album.
Even granting that Kendrick was deeply personally wronged by the motherfucker and he had it coming, Kendrick is supposed to be like the activist, right? The artist. Why is he doing this? Why is a Pulitzer winner taking the stage on Juneteenth to do 6 encores where he does nothing but shit on a professional rival? Like, Drake touches kids seems like a weird Juneteenth message to me, especially in an election year. Like, we got nothing better to talk about than one guy who sucks.
I'm sorry. In a climate with Diddy's charges, you're really gonna ask that question?
And beyond that, you think that maybe the reasoning you just gave for how personally wrong Kendrick was could be part of how it escalated like that? And lest we forget what was in Drake's the day before Not Like Us. I mean, he did call Kendrick a wife beater.
And before that concert, Drake, as Jacob pointed out earlier, responded to the allegations by saying he was too famous to not get caught doing that shit. When even ignoring the climate of the Diddy indictment has been proven to be the worst offense you could ever make to that more times than anyone should feel comfortable with throughout human history, even if you go back to Jimmy fucking Savile.
There's also you thinking the only thing he said against Drake was the shit to call him a predator? I mean, yeah, okay, he did a lot of calling him a predator, but it wasn't just about touching kids, it was also about...
No. Part of that is part of the reason we're covering this. Just save it. Boon, you are not telling me this spook-ass little bitch tries...
But you gotta be careful saying shit like that about Kendrick. Like, I said on Twitter once that, my very favorite Kendrick songs aren't the ones about deep issues. It's the ones about drinking too much and wanting to be left alone.
Sometimes I need to be alone.
Very me songs. And then a bunch of Kendrick stans got on me. I was like, oh, you don't get it. Those songs were actually very deep about the culture of alcoholism and its effects on the... God, Kendrick fans are so corny.
Okay, but that literally is what Swimming Pools is about. It starts with him talking about family members struggling with alcoholism, and the bridge at the end provides a direct and incredibly obvious comparison between shots from a gun and shots of alcohol.
Yeah, I feel like finding basic levels of lyrical analysis corny is a bad look, coming from, I don't know, let's say, for example, a pop music critic!
Hey, watch that shit, Boon. You want to get called corny by Todd in the Shack. Goddamn, I can't say that shit with a straight face. This motherfucking a whole damn cob.
But they have a point. He is Kendrick Lamar. He's earned the benefit of the doubt. So let's see what he's saying here. Starting with how he nullified Drake's attacks. Since this whole thing has broken out, I have thought a lot about how I'd handle a rap beef with Kendrick Lamar in a lot of the same way that Aaron Carter used to dream of beating Shaq at basketball. But if I were in the unenviable position of battling Kendrick, if I were Drake in this position, I'd have two moves. Neither of which were making receiptless accusations about his personal life, for the record. Do not do that. Okay, but here's what I do. One, you make him look like a phony and a hypocrite. You're calling me a pop star. You're the pop star, Mr. Marvel soundtrack.
Yeah, okay, I get what you're saying here, but that angle works a lot better as the response than what you come out the gate with.
And yeah, Drake did actually use this. You're about to point that out. I'm going to discuss how it was one of the biggest holes in what he said. But, well, first thing to address is that it just straight up wasn't said in response, and while you could use it to sort of 8-mile the subject before it comes up, that's not really the way Drake used it in the first place. But again, we're gonna have to talk about that in a moment.
And that approach doesn't really work in the first place when the song that, according to you at least, incited the whole thing had Drake directly comparing himself to Michael Jackson, so no matter which way you slice it, it's not exactly the defensive angle you're making it out to be.
Making songs with Taylor Swift and The Weeknd and Sia and SZA and whoever. And Drake did try and punch in that direction, but he completely fucked it up. His whole line of attack is that Kendrick is a little bitch who has to do what his label tells him to do.
Top will make you do features for change. Get on pop breakers and rap for the whites and wait.
No, you moron. That's what Kendrick wants you to think. That works in his favor. That lets him explain why he's out here collaborating with Imagine Dragons.
That wasn't even the main point of what Drake said. Hell, it wasn't even close to the main point of what Drake said. He's saying that his old label head, Top Dog, was extorting him.
Look, dog, I'm aware that you're so far out of the culture that you don't even know where the house is or why that's actually a reference to the culture, but what it's actually doing is actually closing that opening of him having an explanation, because the explanation also makes him look bad. I mean, by the time he said it in Family Matters, it was kind of lame though. But it don't have to do with the angle being wrong in the first place, but really because Kendrick already disarmed that shit.
Hey, Top Dog, who the fuck they think they playing with? Extortion my middle name as soon as you jump off of that plane, bitch.
And I mean, look, maybe it's just me, but I feel like calling someone a slave to the whims of their label is actually technically a good angle of attack, so your reason for it not being bad is, well, kind of just not very good.
Yeah, the real reason it sucks, well, okay, one of many real reasons it sucks, is because, in actuality, Drake's the one that's a slave to his label, and if you don't believe me, go look and see how his fans are justifying those lawsuits. I'll wait. I won't fuck-
Oh, the label made him do it. And since he broke free of his contract, he has not done any of that, so there you go. You gave him an out, you dummy.
Beyonce? America has a problem? Ringity bells?
Boon, do you really expect this much of a basic-ass bitch to remember anything that isn't so overplayed that it may as well be by Nickelback featuring Imagine Dragons?
I'm sorry, you can't talk about the Black Panther soundtrack being music for white people. Shut your whole ass up. Actually, no, he's saying it's music for a pop audience. A distinction that's gonna piss both of us off the more that we hear it. And the more that he elaborates on it, actually.
Think about it.
Wait, is that why he mentioned SZA?
In that case, gentlemen, allow me to do you one better. Because he definitely recorded with Taylor Swift after 2022. Or did you guys not realize that the two of them doing the Bad Blood remix was their idea to begin with?
Oh, yeah, right, that whole Taylor's version thing. Wow, I did not think that was gonna come up.
Oh, yeah, right. And the thing is, the existence of the song actually destroys Drake's narrative of him being forced to work in pop way more than making an excuse that Kendrick can make does. I mean, the whole reason for the re-recordings is because of Scooter Braun not giving Taylor her masters. And in the case of the remix, Kendrick's master, which I can imagine Kendrick also had a vested interest in. So, even if it was extortion from TDE that made the song happen in the first place, it proves that him working with pop artists really does have nothing to do with TDE, at the very least in the case of Taylor Swift.
So if that's not how you're going to take it, then you can try the other tactic I thought of, which is use being a pop star to your advantage. He makes you look like a corny sellout, you make him look like a pretentious snob. It doesn't have to be true necessarily, it just has to be true enough. Like, Kendrick is a guy who gets up on his high horse about Photoshop and plastic surgery. He was on his last album lecturing his fans about liking him too much.
That's not what Mr. Morale was.
You know, honestly, I feel like we'd be here until the 2035 Super Bowl if we went over every instance of him not understanding what things are about.
This is a really big instance of that, though. Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers was in no way about people liking him too much. It was about generational trauma. You know how the flaws that you see as a child by your parents can often be repeated, even if you're aware of the problem and work to avoid the same thing? You know, like, if, for example, if your dad didn't know how to talk through difficult subjects, so he just kind of bottled up those frustrations and pushed them into training instead, even though it really doesn't solve anything, you kind of unintentionally learn to handle your issues the same way. You know, maybe as an example. What?
There's an opening there, is what I'm saying. And Drake did attempt this also.
Always rapping like you about to get the slaves free. Kendrick just opened his mouth. Someone go hand him a Grammy right now.
So, I think what we should do here is go over both of these lines in relation to how they work with the overall narrative of the battle and Todd's assertion that they're attacking a perceived pretension in Kendrick's music.
We'll start with rapping like you're trying to get the slaves free because, homie, that is not an angle of attack. It's an attempt to attack this angle, but in reality is going at a different angle, which, you know, the context of the bar lays out pretty well.
Always rapping like you about to get the slaves free. You just acting like an activist. It's make-believe. Don't even go back to your hood and plant no money trees.
Yeah, I think the worst part about you missing that shit is that it ain't even a double, homie. He just says that Kendrick's pretending to be an activist. I mean, that's definitely related to his deep shit being pretentious, sure, but really it's saying that it's fake deep, which is different from the way J. Cole went at the angle you're talking about.
Your first shit was classic, your last shit was tragic. Your second shit put niggas to sleep, but they gassed it.
He just straight up said that people were overrating his music. It was less personal of a jab, but more about the music than about Kendrick as a person, which is the angle Drake was going at, being more personal, that is. I could spend a ton of time talking about how this jab was actually real well done in terms of keeping defenses against a rebuttal up, but this shit ain't really about 7-minute drill, and I really need to only point out one other aspect of how these are different. Cole's diss, at the very least, can fall in the realm of subjectivity. Drake's is just a fucking lie. Kendrick does put money back into Compton. He is about as literally planting money trees as physically possible. That's, you know, one of the ways this angle fails. The other one, considering Kendrick directly rebuttals it for an entire verse on Not Like Us, is something I'm sure we're going to talk about later.
Oh, actually, the thing we're going to be saving for later is the fact that he doesn't cover that at all.
Boy, I'm about to spike up your dome piece. Turn Todd the Shadows in the Shadow of the Hedgehog, motherfucker.
Hey, whoops, almost forgot about the second line there. You know, the somebody give him a Grammy right now. That was actually kind of a funny dismissal of Kendrick's accomplishments, but at the same time, it's also one that Kendrick doesn't really need to counter. It kind of just, you know, it's just there. And he doesn't really need to do anything to make it a diss. J. Cole did more to do that on 7 Minute Drill than Drake did.
Funny thing about it, bitch, I don't even want the prestige. Fuck the Grammys, cause them crackers ain't never done nothing for me. Ho.
And unlike, what Drake had to say about it, it actually goes into Drake's angle of making music for white people. Kendrick wins Grammys because he appeals to these old white guys. At least that's the thesis of what J. Cole was saying here. Part of the reason that Drake's punch didn't really land is because he didn't go after the Grammys as an institution for it, which there are clear underlying reasons for that maybe having to do with Drake's constant jealousy over not getting the same accolades. So he can't really call them out as a white institution in the same way that J. Cole can. Or else his desire for critical acclaim from them serves to help Kendrick in a very direct fashion.
And at the very least, it's the actual thing you're talking about Drake doing, unlike the first one. And some of you are probably wondering why we need to make this whole giant diatribe about what these lyrics are actually about and how they play into the narrative of the battle. Actually, wait, yeah, why do we need to do that? I thought this video was about Todd.
Boon, okay, I know you're not used to having series other than Boon Canon, but, if you wanted to do a breakdown, you could have just done it. You didn't need to get me and Jacob in here for it.
There's a reason this is an actual commentary, okay? It all stems back to how little Todd seems to understand the narrative of the battle. And trust me, his lack of understanding is going to get far worse, enough to justify this being Boon canon, okay?
That's what made Not Like Us such a brilliant move. It neutralized that completely. He made a song that sounds like fucking Lean Back, and there are lines in it where he flows like Chingy or somebody.
Say Drake, I hear you like I'm young. You better not ever go to...
Say he sounds like Chingy. Play Nelly. Bitch, what?
Hey, Jake, when were you gonna tell me that 3 words makes up an entire flow?
I wasn't. 'Cause it fucking don't. Yo, Todd, have you actually ever listened to Kendrick rap, once in your fucking life? Because that whole wavy flow he got going on, that ain't no shit. Have you never heard Humble? DNA? King Kunta? You were talking about swimming pools earlier. It's got him riding a beat in pools. Just because it got subject matter don't mean it's not a bop. Oh, trust me. That comment is going to be relevant later. Although, admittedly, it's going to be a lot more of what Dale and I have to say.
Wait a minute, me? Boon, I'm not sure if you noticed, but Jake knows a lot more about rap than me. Chances are it's going to be something he knows a little bit better than I do.
See, the problem here is that you're assuming that the thing you're going to be pissed about is rap-related.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Just a perfect demonstration to Drake that, I can do what you do, you can't do what I do. So that's why Drake never landed that knockout blow. But again, this is supposed to be about Kendrick, and Kendrick had 2 lines of attack of his own. The first is that Drake sucks as a person.
Fuck no Wayne Grow, he was in jail, that's conniving.
In fact, all of the diss tracks he issued hammered that one. This hit a lot harder than Drake's attempts to do it to Kendrick because Drake demonstrably does suck as a person. And I think that's just something we could all kind of sense.
Oh, it ain't like he, lost a beef to the exact same shit before. Oh, including the fact that he's just kind of using black culture and the white side of his culture comes out way more predominant when you look at the way he actually acts. That was a huge part of Kenny's angle. And yet, for some reason, the fact that it doesn't come up at all when talking about the way that Kendrick was attacking Drake, in spite of the fact it was the cheap subject of a whole verse of Not Like Us, was incredibly prevalent in Euphoria, to the point where what was said in Euphoria about Drake using the N-word was attempted to be rebutted by Drake in the first line of Family Matters.
Now, to be fair, it might not be something that Todd knows enough about to feel comfortable commenting on.
Yeah, sure. Keep that defense in mind. But you know what, let me just go ahead and debunk that while we're at it. You don't think he understands race enough to talk about race? Maybe he, shouldn't be talking about a song inherently about race? Even if it's gonna get him a bunch of views? Or is he just a greedy fuck? I mean, Hey, you tell me. At the very least, he could acknowledge that it was part of the angle, but not a part of it he understands well enough to comment on. But he just, kind of pretends it doesn't exist, even though it's incredibly obvious. You could argue it's part of the being a bad person angle, but something seems very weird about the fact that he's dancing around bringing it up on such a consistent basis.
Like, I had some kind of misplaced sympathy for the guy because everyone was ganging up on him, but what I should have been asking is,
man, what did he do to make them that mad?
Like, what is he like in real life that everyone, including his closest collaborators, all hate his guts? Like this whole line right here.
You ain't in no big three. SZA got you wiped down. Travis got you wiped down. Savage got you wiped down.
SZA's not a rapper. Can he really not think of a third guy he's on good enough terms with to name drop?
Hey, why you gotta be a guy? Nicki Minaj is right there.
I mean, ignoring the fact that these statements are, kind of incorrect.
Honestly, the especially funny part about this particular point is that he seems to think that Drake's on decent terms with SZA of all people, while Drake is slandering her label boss.
And of course, Kendrick's biggest thing during this was to amplify the rumors that, Drake is trolling around high schools looking for girls. Now, I said this in the first video, I'm not super comfortable with this. Like, floating accusations of a crime this serious without any receipts to back it up, man, I don't know about that. On the other hand, I am a firm believer in turnabout being fair play. Drake was the one to open that can of worms. He went low first. He was the one who started throwing accusations around. I think I heard something once about a rule in Looney Tunes that Bugs Bunny had to get smacked 3 times before he retaliate.
Of course you realize this means war.
So he never looks like a bully. That's exactly the move Kendrick pulled. He played it perfectly.
I mean, he was already kind of hitting at that on Euphoria.
We hate the bitches you fuck cause they confuse themselves with real women.
That line hits a little different after knowing his angle after Family Matters, don't it?
And, Drake's actually the one who brought up talking about him liking young girls. Or, I guess more accurately, AI Tupac did, but still.
So, for those of you wondering why I'm not playing the clip from Taylor Made Freestyle to prove my point, that specific thing is why. Honestly, Drake deserves to be canceled for that alone. Oh, and by the way, that wife beater angle? Yeah, Kendrick also predicted that.
Fabricate stories on the family front cause you heard Mr. Morale.
That's something, by the way, he'd continue doing on the fake version of The Heart Part 6, by the way, when he brought up Mother I Sober as the reason Kendrick was supposedly obsessed with pedo allegations, which, I mean, I'd imagine if you actually thought that they were true, there might be better reasons to feel like it's worth focusing on, but, maybe that's just me.
So even though that's the most serious accusation, I actually don't find it as interesting as the second main attack that Kendrick pulls, which is that Drake sucks as an artist.
There's some B-rest stands for bitch and you Malibu most wanted.
Now that's very interesting to me.
Yeah. Interesting's the right word, I guess. Especially since he doesn't actually say that Drake sucks as an artist. In fact, he pretty early says the opposite of that.
I like Drake with the melodies. I don't like Drake when he act tough.
Like, this is the same song where he praises back to back. Come on, man. That line you played about Malibu's Most Wanted is a real interesting example of your point, though. I mean, do you know what that movie's about? It's about a suburban white guy pretending to be a hardcore gangster rapper. So, Todd, what do you think that line is saying about Drake? Yeah, funny how you ignore the blackness of Kendrick's stance again. Now, given what the overall point is about to be, you could argue that he doesn't think that this is part of black culture, but instead more so about authenticity. But here's the thing. The authenticity argument and the debate about Drake's blackness are, in the instance of this beef, intrinsically linked to the point where talking about one without talking about the other feels, at the very least, a little bit dishonest.
Like, there have been a lot of shots about how Drake isn't real hip-hop, and Kendrick goes into a lot of detail about it. Now, I personally am not equipped to talk about real hip-hop, but I come from this from a pop perspective, and as a pop critic, this kinda hit something for me.
I mean, I'd argue you in particular aren't really qualified to talk about this from a pop perspective either, based on what you're gonna say. Trust me, that's gonna make sense in a moment. But let's just focus on why you're talking about the beef in general at all is flawed with you not knowing hip-hop. Starting with the fact that you made an entire other video on the beef as though you understood the hip-hop aspect of the climate and still got things wrong.
So, the thing about you being a pop music critic, right? You're not a critic of the genre of pop. You're more of a critic of music that happens to be popular. In the first video, in fact, you actually went into detail about rap having reduced popularity and the trends that seem to fuel more prominence for the genre. That's what you're good at least what you present as being good at. Talking about what does and does not resonate with a common audience, and not necessarily the sound that is associated with being pop. And even then, if you look at the history, it's evolved over time. It originally encompassed mostly rock music, but now a lot of the influences people associate with the pop genre are more fueled by rhythm and blues. Which admittedly also has its origins in rock, but still. That's an evolution in and of itself to talk about, honestly.
Speaking of that evolution, nowadays hip-hop is an intrinsic part of pop. You said it yourself in the previous video. The only person that was outselling Drake was Taylor Swift. Rap guest verses on songs by non-rap acts are now the norm instead of a novelty. Country was even trying to cop rap Zora at one point. At some point, you gotta learn a thing or two about the culture, even if your knowledge of it is rooted in the modern understanding and not the roots of it. And it's not like rap as pop is even a new concept. I mean, Tupac ring any bells? Biggie? Jay-Z, Wayne, Kendrick himself, and that's part of an overarching problem. Todd seems to think that he can talk about a popular song without really talking about its underlying genre, something that I actually don't really see him try to do as much with One Hit Wonderland, interestingly enough, but I've seen it for years when EDM was at the top of the charts, and now he's doing it again with rap. And I'm not even saying there's anything wrong with looking at rap from the lens of pop, by all means, but you still have to get some kind of understanding of the genre if you're going to talk about something that is culturally involved with the genre, like the Drake and Kendrick beef. We've already addressed a lot of what you don't understand on that front. And now we get to talk about how you don't understand it from a pop perspective either.
I made a stray comment about this in the first video, but I want to expand on it here, so let's roll way back. For the last 20 years, music criticism has been shaped by a movement called poptimism.
What's the deal with this pop life?
Which existed in opposition to rockism. Which, it's rock supremacy, basically.
I just want a real quick freeze frame on this, because combined with the way that you explain poptimism in the way that you do, it paints a very specific image of what you mean when you talk about poptimism as a movement, which is more or less correct for now, but note how it portrays all electronic music as pop and basically defines classic rock as the antithesis of this, even though, Journey exists.
At the same time, when looked at from a more broad lens, poptimism is about progressivism, not necessarily in forms of political ideology, but rather what it means for music to be authentic. Basically a pushback on the idea of newer music being bad because of its use of electronic instruments, but instead of focusing criticism on how these instruments are used.
An unsurprising level of nuance coming from someone I personally have publicly criticized for not understanding that a synth line can have emotive meaning, even if that emotive meaning isn't energetic. So, that's the thing about what I just said. You're the rockist here. You've been rockist for decades now. Keep that in mind as we go forward.
And it was a big criticism of all the big journalists and gatekeepers of music at that time.
Okay, small criticism here, but, Rolling Stone is a magazine about rock music.
I don't think it really makes sense to be judgmental of Rolling Stone for being preferential towards the genre it's basically named after. Yeah, that's like getting on a XXL for not covering Taylor Swift, especially since the band on the cover in this case is Aerosmith, which is cap when talking about the narrow definition of rock that's in relation to rockism, considering, I mean, you know, the whole Run DMC thing. They were one of the first rock acts to embrace hip-hop.
Never mind Aerosmith's use of synths over the years, and I don't just mean guitar pedals. Dream On is well known for its keyboard riff, Dude Looks Like a Lady heavily uses sampling, if you think Ragdoll's Kick and Stare aren't artificially sweetened, you're dreaming, and those horns in most of their songs? Why do you think they're never played live?
Now, to be fair... Yeah, this fits in more with the ideals of rockism than someone like Natasha Bedingfield or her brother Daniel Bedingfield. Yes, that's a real person. But all that does is serve to highlight how silly the rockism argument is when you break it down. The elements that rockists chastise are elements that even the classic rock bands they praise heavily utilized. After all, the DAW was the synth keyboard, before that it was the effects pedal, and before that was the music studio itself.
Before this, the idea that we would talk about like Christina Aguilera as like a real serious artist, it was a joke. She wasn't a real musician like Eric Clapton or whoever. In 2002, Pitchfork wrote a joke review of Kylie Minogue. What's the joke, you're asking? That is the joke. The joke is that Pitchfork reviewed Kylie Minogue. The idea that this would be funny is so dated, it may as well be written in hieroglyphics. The joke doesn't make any sense at all these days, where everyone, including Pitchfork, treats Ariana Grande with the same weight and gravity that they used to cover Radiohead with. That's what poptism was all about, dismissing all the snobbery that said we would never review someone as shallow as Kylie Minogue. Like, we wrote all that off as a bunch of tedious boomer shit coming from gatekeeping old white guys. Drop your preconceptions about authenticity or whatever. Sometimes you just want to dance. Sometimes you just want to listen to something catchy, and that's okay. And more than okay, it's worthy of praise, we all decided.
You know, I was about to give you a skip screen on that one because you were just saying a bunch of correct things, but, no, it's not just sometimes you want to dance. The definition you gave even specifically highlights rockism as being about the use of electronic instruments.
And even if you want to say it's about authenticity, it's not even saying that sometimes you want something mindless. In fact, saying sometimes you just want to dance as the endpoint is the opposite of what everything else you said implies. That pop music has artistic value, and it being catchy and marketable doesn't really take away from that.
I also noticed you ain't playing any rap songs when talking about all this. Could it be that rap was already being taken seriously from an artistic perspective by this point, and thus wasn't involved in this conversation? So, may want to get to how this is relevant to Kendrick and Drake pretty quick, all I'm saying. That's history lesson to give context to what he was about to say. It took like 4 bars, homie.
Nowadays, we respect pop. Or do we? For all that the discourse has been shaped by quote-unquote poptimism, pop is still an insult when you apply it to genres other than pop music. Pop rap is still an insult. Pop country is still an insult. If you called Coldplay pop, you would understand that as an insult because they're supposed to be an alternative rock band, allegedly. So being called pop cheapens them.
I mean, other than the fact that most of the time this is stuff that hipsters say is an insult and not the majority of people, and I should know, when you're talking about popularity, generally people aren't even going to pay attention to a subgenre designation, and if they do, it's really just an indicator that the subgenre uses sounds and methodologies associated with pop as a genre, rather than pop as an indication of popularity.
There are also plenty of pop-named subgenres that aren't treated as insults, but I can name you one specific one that actually seems like it should be the primary one that would be an insult. Pop punk. Think about it. The genre that is specifically about being anti-establishment, sounding like that genre from the lens of the musical establishment. And somehow that's one of the main versions of this trope that is embraced by those who are classified under it.
Hey, you know who the only person I've heard using the term pop rap since 2014 is? Or, better yet, the only person I've ever heard talk about pop country? That'd be you.
And you're also the main one using the idea of calling a band like Coldplay pop rock as an insult. And even then, maybe the insult in a situation like that has less to do with pop being a dirty word and more to do with the feeling misclassified or put into a box where the type of music they make doesn't matter because of the fact that they're popular.
Wait. So you mean to tell me that the guy who's ignoring the ramifications on hip-hop culture in a hip-hop beat don't understand that the insult isn't ignoring the culture the one's music comes from?
Yeah, I very much actually, in fact, do mean to say that.
Funny how that works, ain't it, Spooks?
That's why the criticism of Drake hits weird for me. Like, I hear all the shit people say, you know, it's shallow, it's superficial, it's all image, it's music for girls, he doesn't even write it himself. These are all things I heard said about Britney Spears and the Backstreet Boys before poptism existed.
Yeah, none of those things are calling him bad for being pop, but pointing out specific criticisms that also apply to previous pop acts. Me and Jacob did a whole video on ghostwriting and rap too, and my stance is in agreement with you on that front.
But that don't mean that ghostwriting can't be a valid criticism, especially if you lying about it, which was one of the main reasons Drake gets blasted for it.
And more proof, by the way, you don't understand what poptimism is, because shallow is still a valid criticism of music under poptimism, because the point is about genres being dismissed as shallow, not the actual piece of work being called shallow, because the critic perceives a lack of depth in that particular work.
And even that interpretation kind of misses something that poptimism tacitly says about using shallow as a criticism. It's kind of superficial and meaningless on its own anyway. And that's also not a criticism people were actually leveling at Drake. Last year I covered Joseph Buckley's Worst Songs of 2023 video when I defended Drake, not on how shallow his music was, and kind of on the fake gangster criticism he was actually getting for his work with 21 Savage.
Mostly saying him being not gangster because he's from Canada is stupid as fuck, Crody.
Stupid as fuck, Crody, indeed. But my primary defense was in regards to the nepotism, an angle you may notice that nobody has taken in the entirety of 2024. Now, you may be wondering, why would I not discuss Drake being shallow in that video? Well, because Buckley didn't mention it. Almost like it wasn't a topic of discussion at the time.
I never want to hear either one of you say Crody again. Shallow is the shit they were saying about Drake in, 2014. Weird how that year keeps being the one your mindset comes from. Almost like that's when you actually were successful and you just stayed there, but, whatever.
To be fair, don't. The elements of the overall point of these criticisms you're talking about is not having a lot of meaning makes sense. Although, I think you're doing what a lot of people do, which is confusing surface-level summary of what someone does or doesn't like for an actual proper critique. I don't know, maybe it's the old man in me talking, but people seem to want the rapid-fire flashy version of what you don't like something over the nuanced response, to the point where even a quick response that has nuance gets the nuance ignored in favor of just insult comedy. And don't get me wrong, the quick version that lacks nuance does have value in highlighting the part of the problem and creating discussion about the nuance. But the problem I'm seeing is that rather than using it to catch attention to the delivery of the nuanced message, it's become a replacement for the detail needed entirely. And you, in turn, are definitely not helping that situation by not only what you do here, treating the one-word answer as the full argument, but also stripping the nuance from something, like poptimism, to the point where that lack of nuance makes it mean something very different from what it actually does. I would think that you would know this considering you take your time in making a lot of your scripts, but, well, in reality, you're falling for the same thing. The only difference is, as we're going to see, it leads to a very faulty game of telephone being played with the meaning behind things.
And I always kind of wondered what it would look like if pop raptimism existed.
Ain't 20v1 is 1v20 if I gotta smack niggas that right with you.
Like this shit about ghostwriters, who cares?
Homie, that is literally the only line that Kendrick said about ghostwriters in, at this point, 15 songs. And that shit was a rebuttal to Drake talking about being dogpiled anyway. He's mad at a bunch of people coming for his neck, pointing out he's got a whole team behind his scenes is a valid way to double back against that.
In fact, you're about to explain the very problem with your statement that we were just talking about. Well, that he was just talking about. I kind of just stood here.
Like, it's been an open secret that Dr. Dre doesn't necessarily write all his own stuff. He's still one of the greats. I mean, there he is standing with Kendrick right there.
Yeah, but the problem isn't just that Drake has writers. The problem is that
You lied about your ghostwriters. You lied about your crew members.
You know, I'm pretty sure the reason that you think Kendrick fans are corny is because you finally hit the age where your ears stop working.
No, bullshit. I'm only like 3 years younger than him, and my hearing's fine.
I mean, yeah, but you spend a lot less time listening to Flowrider.
Yeah, actually, I suppose that would do it.
And Snoop uses ghostwriters now too. He's admitted it. He's not one bit ashamed of it. He cited Diana Ross, one of the greatest ever pop stars, as his reason. So like, you know, what if? What if pop rappers were given any respect? What if the big three were Flowrider, Pitbull, and Fergie?
Except they don't sell as well as Drake, Kendrick Lamar, and J. Cole. Sales are part of what makes the big three, and Flowrider sales weren't ever as big as any of those three. Okay, well, maybe at one point he was above J. Cole, but...
Funny you should say that, because the point you're about to make, I can make it better. So we've already established how, based on the criticisms he gets, Drake seems to fit the pop rap mold, right? He does in ways that actually matter to pop as a genre as well. Many of his most popular songs are more so about hype and self-aggrandizing than conflict, especially the type of conflict rap is usually about. And while that's changed somewhat in more recent years, what hasn't is his tendency to be more melodic. He even sings on a lot of his songs. J. Cole is someone also known for positivity to the point where his biggest rap beat before all of this involved him wishing well of the person dissing him and sitting down for an on-camera conversation with him at an award show. If you want to talk about poptism lyricism, J. Cole has a song about doing chores for his wife. He's one step below Chance the Rapper on the virtue scale when it comes to his lyrics. It's no wonder he backed out when it came to diss track season. It's just not his style. And as for melodic, although he did that more with his initial hits, including when he sampled Paul Abdul for his first big hit.
Oh, damn, I almost forgot about that shit. Hey, we got a good thing. Don't know if I'ma see you again.
Okay. So it's really easy to make the argument that 2 out of the big 3 are pop rap. So when a battle initiates involving them, look who comes out on top. The one who doesn't have the pop elements and focuses on being the best at his genre, proving that people don't actually want rap to mix with pop in as a direct fashion as having the same artist doing both genres. Which is part of the point you're about to make, but again, doing it my way, you don't even have to bring up artists that haven't been popular since... Okay, admittedly, they were popular in 2018, but we'll just say 2014 just to stick with the meme that you're 10 years behind instead of 5 or 6.
It sounds ridiculous, right? We don't think that way. Kendrick proved it.
You run to Atlanta when you need a few dollars. No, you're not a colleague, you a fucking colonizer.
Not Like Us is one of the most stunning defeats of poptimism I've ever seen. Like, the chorus is not like us.
They not like us. They not like us. They not like us.
That's literally gatekeeping. That's the literal definition of gatekeeping. Kendrick attacks Drake for being a pop star. Kendrick destroys Drake for being a pop star.
No, he doesn't. Carolina Blue kicks pressure on the... oh, shit, sorry. Yeah, actually, Kendrick don't give a fuck about Drake being pop.
I like Drake with the melodies. I don't like Drake when he act tough.
That's one of the biggest problems with you acting like this is about pop and not about hip-hop. Because Kendrick's issue with Drake is with hip-hop. You even played the colonizer line from Not Like Us right before saying this, where he said it himself. He's here for the money and not for the culture. So you can't really say that you don't know the culture and talk about Kendrick attacking him for pop.
You're right, though. It is gatekeeping, but for one, you should really watch FD Signifier's video on the subject to understand why some amount of gatekeeping is good and intrinsic to hip-hop and black culture to prevent people from taking advantage of it. And for two, the gate Kendrick builds is very much about the pedophilia allegations leveled at, well, kind of Drake's entire team, really, as well as the other ways that Drake is just a bad person.
They are, in fact, not like us. Not in terms of musical genre, but in terms of moral standing. That's why the issues of Drake being a bad person are relevant to why he says that they're not like us.
And it kind of makes me wonder what poptimism has actually meant. Like, what is it? What was the meaning behind this? And my conclusion is it means the gays like it. Right? That's all it means?
You gotta be fucking kidding me!
Okay, please tell me this man did not just say that.
Yeah, so, now you guys know why I'm here. This is the most head-ass thing that you could have ever fucking said in your life. But, hey, you know what? I'm a nice guy. I'll let you...
Bitch, I'm fucking not! The fuck you mean Poptimism was about music the gays like? For one, the gays like whatever fucking music we want to. Shut the fuck up trying to gatekeep based on sexual preference. For two, what the fuck does that say about the pop music reviewer that straight up don't understand the shit that would fall under the anti-rockism umbrella that poptimism falls under, not being taken seriously? You know, all the EDM that you don't get because you don't go to clubs? Well, I guess just fucking gay clubs, right? Third of all, fuck you in the general sense, non-sexually. I ain't interested. Got better taste than men. Yo, pasty ass, wanna be Zorro looking head ass, fucking hoodie looking like it ain't been washed in 6 months looking ass. Fuck out of here with that bullshit!
I think what Jake means is that this bitch needs to choose his next words very carefully.
No, that ain't what I meant. I meant he can get out of here right now. That might be what you meant. That ain't what I meant.
Optimism is, I think, inextricable from the rise of gay rights as a mainstream movement.
Okay, so what Jake said he means is now what I mean. What the hell are you talking about? Optimism as a term was coined around 2006. The first gay pride parade was in 1994. Pitchfork wouldn't make fun of Kylie Minogue until 8 years after gay pride was allowed to be acknowledged on a widespread basis. And that even assumes you want to place the start of the movement there, when the modern movement really goes back to roughly 1988, and that assumes we separate it from the focus on the AIDS crisis. And even way before that, you have the 1970 pride marches, Stonewall, and that shit. And the only reason I'd separate the 1988 movement from that is because of how much of the leadership, you know, died of AIDS in the interim.
Okay, look. Todd, you and I are both from the South. Well, slightly allegedly in your case, but I'll just let that slide. Considering the progression of things in relation to where we're from, I can see why you, a straight man, would not have inherently known this. I'm from a state where my sexual orientation was literally illegal until 2003, and one of the 2 states that still has more people against same-sex marriage than for it. So, as both somewhat aware of the zeitgeist of pop music and the ramifications of the LGBTQ movement on a first-hand level, what you just said is complete horseshit. And you did a video where you debunked James Somerton in detail on things he got wrong in regards to LGBTQ issues. But then you want to turn around and make a half-assed, half-baked, and borderline offensive designation like this. Jacob's right. Go fuck yourself. Then maybe you'll know something about our struggle.
And once the gays became widely understood as a marginalized demographic worth respecting, so too did quote-unquote gay music. One of the big attacks on rockism was being homophobic, and one of the first major moves of poptimism was a reevaluation of disco. That's why shitting on pop music now gets you the same dirty looks that disliking rap music does, because of all those concrete ties to a respectable social movement.
Okay, I will at least slightly function in defense of Todd here. He's painting poptimism as existing long before the term did by playing a clip of 90s EDM when talking about the acceptability of gay music, which to some extent I can see at least making the argument for, but it does fly in the face of the narrative through line presented in this video. Remember, the 2002 Pitchfork review of Kylie Minogue was an example of the heights of rockism, and you yourself, Todd, said earlier that poptimism was the last 20 years. And the only way to put that even close to the right time frame is if you said something like that in
2014?
Yeah, actually, pretty much exactly then.
Yeah, funny how that shit works, ain't it?
So for all that quote-unquote poptimism has replaced rockism, it kind of feels like it's just the same thing with a coat of pink paint on it. Rock fans were pretentious about rock because it was the sound of rebellion and youth, and hip-hop is the sound of the disenfranchised, and now pop has its movement. Genre respect is still tied to its social importance.
Okay, first of all, while I get why you think throwing around a pink coat of paint is cool and all, that's more so an association with gay men, and actually has pretty sexist connotations involving gay men being treated as less of a man because of their sexuality. So purple or lavender is the preferable gay color, because even though the historical association with gay men is still there, it doesn't have as strong of a sexist undertone, albeit specifically saying lavender tends to have a little bit more of a association with being borderline a slur. You're saying anything about a pink coat of paint comes across as either homophobic, sexist, or both. Take your pick how you want to look like a piece of shit today. I don't even think you meant it like that either. I just think you have no clue what you're talking about.
Something you said leads me towards a potential homophobic undertone that you might not be aware of, though. I think it tells a lot that you view a movement that is asking for a genre of music to not be treated as lesser artistically the same as the movement that directly treats that genre as lesser artistically. What it displays to me is that you view equality between pop and rock as something that places pop in a position above rock, a position of favoritism, even if the movement overtly calls for equal standing and not greater. Given how you feel it's intrinsically tied to LGBTQ rights, what does that tell us about your views on that topic?
And on top of that, a little bit less important than what he just said, but you telling me gay people ain't disenfranchised, homie?
Oh, yeah, fuck. Yeah, that's an implication that could only be made by a straight white guy.
Isn't he, half Vietnamese, though?
I stand by my statement. Straight white guy is a mindset.
And this is why Drake, as a pop rapper, seems to have no respect at all anymore. Rap music was already connected to something culturally important. It has been since its inception. Being pop means nothing here because there's not really a whole lot aesthetically gay about any of this.
What do you... Most pop ain't aesthetically gay.
No, it gets worse.
Kendrick said some things in this feud that kind of border on homophobic. Has a whole song about being late to the party on this issue.
Oh, wow, you're right. That line was not about Drake being gay. That was about him not liking women as people. It was about misogyny. It means he likes pussy, but not women. I mean, I suppose the whole thing about him popping ass could be seen as homophobic through the right lens, but yeah, borderline is about right. It might even be a bit of a stretch, but I get why you might say that about other lines, but only really get it here if you're bad at lyrical right. Todd in the Shadows. Yeah, that tracks.
Hey, about Anti-Diaries, I don't know how you expect an elementary schooler in the early 90s, as in the actual perspective the song is from, to be late to the party. And in fact, part of the point of that line in particular is to highlight how children tend to not know any better. But you kind of put this out here as though it's from the point of view of present-day Kendrick.
Wait. So, Todd heard some lyrics on Mr. Morale and misconstrued them to give Kendrick some kind of major problem that doesn't fucking exist?
Yeah. If I were you, Todd, I'd avoid any further comments that make it easier to compare you to Drake. I'm pretty sure Jacob has a Rolodex for those kind of jokes.
A Rolodex. One Rolodex. Yeah, okay. Actually, hold on. How many stocks do I really got in stock?
And Drake said things that were just homophobic straight up.
Your music getting played in all the spots where boys got a little more pride.
In fact, Kendrick straight up admitted that he enjoyed Drake the pop star, not the rapper.
And yet you call Kendrick's side of this a takedown of optimism, when Drake is the one saying that a pop star appeals primarily to the gays. Drake is the only one in this beef that said being a pop star was a bad thing when he critiqued Kendrick for working with pop stars. Drake is the one who disses operate under the purview of the homophobic version of rockism that you have presented. Somehow I doubt you're gonna get why this doesn't make sense, but I sure as hell hope my audience does.
Making pop connects you to something important. Making pop rap disconnects you from it.
Okay, but you just said that rap was about the disenfranchised and pop was about the gays. So, you are saying that gay people aren't disenfranchised? Todd, homie, this is what pretending to be an ally looks like.
And Kendrick just lays all that out in devastating detail.
Once upon a time, all of us was in chains. Homie still double down, calling us some slaves.
Who was he calling slaves, Todd?
Do gay black people just not exist?
Yeah, I guess not. Sorry, Frank Ocean, you ain't real no more.
I mean, considering how often people even see him, I guess you could... Never mind.
If you think that if anyone was going to make the case for pop rap as a worthy genre, it'd be Drake, who's been playing both sides of the hits credibility divide for a long time. Like, he was one of the big three. He was respected. But it turns out he was the absolute worst person to make a case for pop rap. His shit hasn't been good in years, and it's all sucked for the same reason pop music in general sucks. The shallowness, the trend writing, the numbers chasing.
Wait a minute, didn't you say that shallow was a dumb criticism earlier? Like, specifically shallowness? But now it's a reason that pop music sucks?
And I'm not going to ask for detail here because I get that it would take a bit and the video isn't really about Drake's body of work, on top of the fact that you say other aspects that could be argued to explain why it's shallow. But the issue here is the hypocrisy. It's a bad criticism for Drake until you say it.
The callow attaching himself to whatever hot newcomer pops up in the scene.
Which is also one of the big criticisms of Drake that a lot of people levied against him, and why so many people he worked with no longer like him. Like, Future? And The Weeknd? And as the resident Weeknd enjoyer around here, thank God he never signed his life away, because another issue is the Drake stimulus package may as well be the EA acquisition package, because he sucks the artistic credibility dry out of a lot of rising artists, and then tosses them aside. Unless, of course, he needs to make a sudden album right after somebody dissed him in order to gain back some sort of credibility. Unless he needs to do that, then he just pulls them out of the closet.
Yeah, funny how you know that that's a problem, but pretend people aren't saying it when it was kind of the catalyst for this entire stage of the beef.
The Drake phenomenon has become painfully hollow. And all that pretentious shit about authenticity we're told doesn't matter anymore, it does matter. It matters a lot.
Once again, that was never the point. What you're describing is a twisting of poptimism into fame worship, but not poptimism itself. The point of dismissing the veil of authenticity is not so much about authenticity itself, but rather redefining the rules by which something is authentic, allowing authenticity to be felt rather than adhere to a methodology. What happens is that, like any communicated message, the nuance gets wrung out of it to mean authenticity doesn't matter, but it does. You can have other writers and still be authentic if what you're doing is working with other people to create clarity in your message. Electronic instruments are just as valid as traditional ones when it comes to expressing emotions through notation, because the instrument is only as good as the one using it. You can put an entire narrative structure into a video and still very directly say things that relate to the wider world around you. You can play a character and still express your real thoughts while doing so. And any and all art should be subject to criticism, both positive and negative.
But relevant to what's going on here, so should the critic. Todd, I'm gonna be real with you, homie. I just fucking hate your ass. I hate the way that you walk, the way that you talk. I hate the way that you dress, the way that you dismiss the culture you're talking about, unless it's European, interestingly enough. The way you think about music. I even hate the way you play fucking piano at the start of the video. Fucking Linus ass goofy bitch. Charlie Brown yo ass and bald head with a peanut. I think you got the impression how I feel about you by now, so I'm gonna pass over to my boyfriend. Don't speak on any culture if you ain't gonna at least learn it on the surface level again. And I mean any culture.
I'm pretty sure you know what he meant by any culture, right? To be quite honest, I get the impression you were trying to give a broader, socially relevant angle, but kind of forced it in to the point where instead of presenting something cool, you said a lot of things that mean what I don't think you realize they do. Like, it is kind of homophobic, and hopefully unintentionally so. And even then, hopefully not in the way where it's a mask slip for underlying prejudice. Just do better, I guess. Read a book. Maybe.
Damn, Todd. Like, this was bad. And let me make something really clear right now. I could have gone even further, I promise. There's a few things after where I stopped that I could have addressed, but I didn't feel like I was really going to get anywhere close to the height of where I'm leaving off at. You were overly dedicated to the big steps that you made to jump to the conclusions that you came to, but instead of putting you on the moral high ground, you wound up with about 80 sections of contradictions in a video that comes across just plain unmastered, with each of the small poor choices resulting in a butterfly effect that results in a mad video that thinks that it's good. And I get no excitement from telling you how much this failed to live up, because you've made videos that I've enjoyed before, but, well, there's some cold, hard truth I think is relevant to you as a whole that kind of leads me towards this. Todd, you are not a critic. Not a real critic, anyway. You're just a kind of a guy who talks about music. I'm not saying that you never were a critic, but I think your abilities as a critic are limited, and based on what I've seen, they've just been exhausted. I felt exhausted by the music review stuff, but I stopped when I saw what I was making was just not going to keep working, and I focused on making something else. Part of that was also me making music for myself a little bit more often. Well, I kind of realized something in the process. People who review media without actually having much, if any, experience in creating that media have a tendency to fall off at how relevant their media criticisms are in the long term. I want to bring up an example of someone you're probably really familiar with, Doug Walker, aka Nostalgia Critic. And as bad as he is on several different levels as a person and a content creator, I would like to look at the time he paused Nostalgia Critic to make Demo Reel. Now, part of the reason nobody liked Demo Reel is because it wasn't what they wanted from Doug. It in and of itself wasn't really that great. None of the Nostalgia Critic movies really are. But one thing that break from reviewing movies in order to make film, even in a shorter format like that, was a recharge and a means of alignment with the medium he reviewed. In other words, I think it was actually good for his long-term success as the Nostalgia Critic because it gave him more of an insight behind the lens as a filmmaker. What Rap Critic has to say about rap tends to remain relevant as well because, well, he makes rap. It's one of the many reasons I find it a lot harder to respect DJ Academics than Joe Budden. Axe never stepped in a booth in his life, while Joe has a lot of experience in that lifestyle. Again, one of the many reasons. Don't get that misconstrued. This is part of what I think is happening with Todd. He's never really made music. He plays piano, sure, but composition? Not something he's done. And on top of his views of what popular music is and why it's popular being dated, what makes him even more stagnant is his disconnect from the compositional structure of music. I mean, think about it. How much of this review was actually about the song he's reviewing? I think there's one point he plays where he talks about Kendrick being good enough to make this type of song and throw an academic lecture in the middle of it, and that's honestly all he says in relation to the song itself, instead focusing on this whole meta-narrative about pop music as a whole, as though he's not really convinced that what he has to say is even good enough. So that's basically my advice. Write a song, Todd. Make an album, Todd. Shut your hoe ass up and make some music, Todd. Holy shit, I just realized, did you just
Yes, even GNX is in there.
Well, I guess there's only one thing left to do now.
Oh, yeah. You still need to have that conversation with Boon, right?
What? Yeah, right, about, her. Yeah, I still need to explain more about that, I guess. But that's, not what I was talking about, though.
Then what were... Oh, shit, no! I am way too white to get away with that.